under the weather today, so I'm keeping off for a longer period of time. It's an absolute pleasure to be here for this session, as it is for all the sessions that I've done, whether that's been on interview preps or any of the standardized tests, including SATs, GRE preps, Fulbright sessions, Fulbright journey. It's I absolutely enjoy these sessions, and I, as Noor mentioned, want to keep them as interactive as possible. What I prefer is for you to engage, whether that's through chat, ask me questions. And I'm here, this time slot I've booked for you. So this is how do we make this more productive for you? You've dedicated an hour of your time with me. So I want to make sure that this is worth your time. So please make it as interactive as possible. Message your friends, tell them that the session's happening online, and yeah, and that they should definitely attend. And let me know if you can see my screen. I think so. Noor, are you able to see my screen?
Could you say that again? Sorry?
Sorry, are you able to see my screen?
Yes, I am.
Okay, fantastic. So on the screen, I'm just going to share a little bit more about my journey and about my past, so you know what I've done, what I've accomplished, so you at least get to know the speaker you're spending an hour of your time with. That's a picture of me. It's an old picture from my graduation. I graduated from Northwestern University in 2013. Currently working in Uber as a senior business development manager. It's been a very interesting journey. I was at Uber then for a few years, and I went to Meta, joined Uber again. But I've been in and around the tech space, which I enjoy quite a bit, around partnerships and business development. This is a little bit about my Fulbright journey. I really think sometimes it's interesting to talk about it because it shows, you're looking at the end product, but excuse me, but the journey can be very complicated and also very divergent at the same time. So I did my O levels in pure sciences, physics, chemistry, and then I think I didn't do bio, I did add maths, but still it was very heavy science focused, although I had no intention of either taking the engineering nor the doctor or the medicine route. Then I did A levels, which was very much focused on mathematics and business. And by that time, I had developed a deeper sense of this is what I wanted to do. Um, in my university, I was passionate about law, finance, architecture. So these were three things that I wanted to choose from, and then eventually leaned towards finance because I thought it was more broader. When I did finance, while I did well, this was from LUMS, I just somehow, so I started working for a couple of years. I think a year and a half before I went for my full ride. But I just was like, no, there is something else that I want to learn. There's something else that I'm more passionate about and I'm more creative in my daily life. And I wanted a job that challenges me. Finance wasn't something that was cut out for me. So I changed my journey there and moved towards actually business and then digital marketing. And that was probably one of the best decisions. I absolutely had a fantastic time at Northwestern University, made great friends. The coursework was great. And then came back and joined tech space. It's a very funny story, maybe for another session because we're short on time. But I actually got a job offer from Uber at that point, from Uber Eats, because I was a graduate from Le Cordon Bleu as well. So they said, okay, you've done your MBA or you've done your business degree and then you've done your culinary degree. That's a really good match for Uber Eats. And I'm like, well, technically, you don't want me to make food. You need more of a business strategy, but somehow that was how the conversation started. And long story short, there were a lot of conversations. From there, I became a launcher for Pakistan, moved to UAE, moved to South Africa for a bit, back to UAE. I was in the UK for a bit. Well, when I say for a bit, I was working from that market based out of UAE, back and forth. So the long story is the journey has been very interesting. You just go with the flow. It takes you to where you sort of need to be. You just need to be passionate about what you love. And now, the interesting part, yeah. I've already talked about it. I think we don't need to get into the GRE, the TOEFLs, and the details of that. But you need to be very passionate about what you're doing in that moment, and the next step sort of, it happens on its own. I also wanted to share this. This is a picture of me skydiving. This is on top of Indiana. I love this picture specifically. It's very raw, very natural. This picture, this slide particularly shares some of my most interesting experience during my full trip. I'm just trying to motivate you how interesting this experience was. I took a cruise to Bahamas for, I think it was my Easter break. I that was the first time. I was very young, but that was the first time I did skydiving, scuba diving. I was the editor of the school magazine. I got to attend concerts I didn't think I would have the opportunity of, like legends, 90 plus year old musicians who were retiring towards their very last tours. I did some of that, culture exchange. And the most interesting one, yes, I got to travel 22 states at that point. Now I think I've seen minus maybe it will be close to like 48 states. But I think all of that aside, what I gained out of that was the relationships and the lifelong friendships that I made, which was just priceless. And I don't think you can ever replace that experience with anything else that I've sort of spoken about. So it's important for us to get her, and why I would be a good person to conduct this session, because I had three virtual interviews with Northwestern. So I had won the Fulbright scholarship, but and I got a conditional admission. They wanted to speak to me, and they did three interviews. I did two extra essays on top of the two I did for Fulbright. And that was just their business school's requirement. And then I did those interviews. So I have a little bit of an experience with that. So I can, put myself in your shoes. And yeah. Now, this is just a thought before we go into the actual words, a quote that I live by um, in my daily life. It's every challenge is an opportunity to elevate yourself. And this is something I want you to always remember, to take it as an opportunity of you reaching your higher self. All right, some more fun pictures, yeah? Again, more motivation. These are pictures. That's my niece and my sister with me visiting at Northwestern University. I was very excited over the summer. Then there's some of my friends there. I think we're celebrating Halloween. This was one of the first music festivals that I attended. So some really cool experiences and memories that are very close and near and dear to my heart. And now we go directly into the session. Before I go into the session, any questions? You need to anything you wanna, any comments, any questions, please put that in the chat. I'm gonna ask you questions myself as well. Um, and yeah, let's proceed. Sorry, I'm gonna be having water in between just to keep my throat a little bit so excuse me, a little bit moist, excuse me that. All right. Now, what do we need to do when we have virtual interviews? First thing, this is now the basic thing. We need to be very certain of the technical and the environmental setup. This is like your baseline. You cannot go wrong with this. You need to make sure before the session you test the webcam, whether it's your computer, phone, whatever device that you're choosing. You need to check the microphone, the internet connection, of course, 24 hours prior, but then I understand the challenges in Pakistan. Make sure you have your phone with the data source as a backup. You need your headphones, earbuds for clear audio. Have the interviewer's contact details just in case, there's an issue. I always have like a number, or I'll ask them for a number just in case if the internet's not working or they're online and you're having internet connections for you to be able to reach out to them. So these three things are an absolute must. Then your visuals and backgrounds. Like I always think three things are important. Always keep an uncluttered background and a neutral one, like a white. I always keep like a white flat background. So that can be against the wall. You need to make sure that the light is great. So there's light on your face. You're looking nice and bright, not like how I'm looking right now. So this is also a test of what not to do because light's coming from my back. It's just unfortunate. Uh, a situation right now that I was unable to move, but you have to be very certain of that. Position camera at eye level. So make sure your positioning is great. These are just your impressions, right? Because when you make a first impression, when you meet someone, how you shake their hand, how your body language is, your chest open up, your posture, these things matter. Similarly, in a virtual interview, these things are absolutely, absolutely critical. Then the last one is focus and distractions. You need to make sure it's a quiet place. There's not a lot of noise happening in the background. Your thought process needs to be focused. Plus, it also gives a very good impression. If it's everything's neat, clean, everything's quiet, as opposed to, there's noise in the background, there's distractions. People don't really prefer that. And make sure your phone is silent. It should be nearby because you might need the data, you might need it for emergency in case your internet's not working to contact the interviewer, but make sure that it is silent and there's no distraction. And disable all computer notifications. A lot of times people forget this, but this is very, very important. All right, I'm going to pause for a bit now and let me know if you have any questions. Let me know if there is anything unclear here, and then we move on to the next part. Guys, you need to ask me questions. You need to engage a little bit in the session. I need to see some engagement. If let's say there are no questions, tell me no questions, everything's clear, let's move on. But I need to get you guys a bit motivated here, huh? To participate. I know it's 5 p.m. your time, your day's ending. Otherwise, I'm gonna start picking on randomly, calling out your names. Okay, I see some activity in the Q&A live. All right, here we go. No questions so far. All right. Ashmal says, what was the most challenging part in the Fulbright journey? Most challenging part, I think, just getting the Fulbright. After that, it was easy. It's worth it, as Noor mentioned. All right. Then not now, no questions. Omar says, okay, move on, please. Great. Everything is good so far. Fantastic. All right, let's go. Let's move on. Now that your base is set, your environment is set, your technology is set, now comes you. That's the actual part. Now, how do you master delivery? How do you impress the interviewer? Now, the gaze is very important. In a lot of cases, we think it's fine. And, if you meet someone in any setting and they're unable to make eye contact with you, the first thing what would you think? All right, let's turn this around. You meet someone and they cannot make eye contact with you. What's your first impression? I'm going in the chat. Maria, what do you think? If you're meeting someone, they're not looking at you directly. What's your impression? Lack of confidence. Hamad says lack of confidence. They're awkward. Yeah, like I mean, you think that there is something that is not maybe ignorance feeling, as Maria said. Yes, there's something that is not impressing you, or they're not very confident, or there is something that is not very charming about them. Something is off. Exactly. Great. So similarly in virtual setting as well, you want to make sure you're looking directly into the cameras. Your gaze is very important. Kamal says they're not very serious. Maybe I'd see them as an underconfident, probably wouldn't be able to initiate the conversation. Yeah, Vasna, that could be a fair point. Might be something taken as for granted. ZM says, yeah, like it's not everything that you guys said. The culmination is nobody has used a positive adjective to describe it, right? And in the interview, we want the tone, the view, the feel all to be positive. So make sure that it's the same in virtual interviews as well. All right, next one. Now, if I was sitting Like I'm sitting like this. If I just suddenly started sitting like this and talking to you, what would you think? Like if I was talking to you like this, like I'm talking and my tone is like this, my hand is like this, my head's leaning. It's it would give a very sloppy experience, right? As opposed to how I was sitting, you're in the middle of the chair, your shoulders are back. Yes, very nice. Kamal said unprofessional. I'm looking very I cannot sit like this, and although this is a session, it gives you cannot command respect from anyone if you are unable to hold yourself in a proper disciplined manner. Yeah, absolutely. It seems you're not interested. It would give an impression that you're not serious about it. Or also, your posture and also tells how confident you are. If you're usually confident people sit up straight, their shoulders are back, they're in the center, they're very much in control. Their body is like a solid block. You have to be careful about that as well. Hand gestures, you might have noticed, I was doing it's natural. And now, yes, you can use your hands. Now, I'm just gonna change the position of the camera a little bit. When you keep your hands here, and it'll obviously change. Like I said, the lighting here is not the best. You can do one or two gestures, but if I keep on doing this, or I do this, or like, this, or I'm distracting you with unnatural hand gestures. But if you see my hand is moving as much and also with the tone of my words, my talking, that is fine. Some people are very animated. I'll give you an example. I was very animated. I would do a lot of gestures. That was naturally my way. I toned it down eventually with training a little bit, but you have to be mindful. Now, how did I do this? I had a blind spot. I didn't really know that I was doing that till I saw a couple of videos of me in sessions and I was like, oh, that's a little bit too much. So I would always suggest to take, I always do whenever I have a big interview, I do proper recorded sessions and then look back at my answers and how I'm looking, what my facial expressions are, how do I sound. I would work on that. Although I don't like hearing my voice, especially, I mean, right now, definitely not when the voice is coarse, and I feel bad for you guys that you have to tolerate this. But having said that, you have to be a little bit, you need to listen to your voice, your video, and see what you're doing right versus what needs improvement. All right, let's see. What do we have there in the chat? Guys, anything on this? Then I'll go in the notes. Any thoughts? Huda, anything from you? Um, it's very important to keep brief notes. What I would typically do is I go a little, I've done this and I'm gonna tell this for certain, I wouldn't take the names of the company, for certain companies that I was interviewing for. Excuse me, big companies, my dream jobs. I literally behind my laptop, I had like charts and charts and charts of things I wanted to say, or I had notes, and I had prepared for all possible questions, what potential question. These are again for companies you can do the same for. Your universities as well, right? But you need to have a list of questions. You need to have all those answers prepared, practice and rehearse. There's always one very easy way of answering the questions, and I'll get into that in the next slide. But I think there is some activity happening in the chat. I like it, and I'm gonna have a look at it. Do you have any notes for how direct we should be? Like, how should we talk about a personal experience or stay on point? Give me an example, Hoda. What question are you referring to? Because your question, I didn't get your question. I'm going to come back to that in the chat, but ask me what you specifically want me to answer. All right. Next one. This is the content part, which is very, very important. So we've talked about the setting, 2 steps done. Your setting is done, your technology is done, your environment's done, how you're sitting, your posture, your presence, you know, that part is done. Now comes the content. Are you an academic fit? Have you prepared for the content? The first thing you need to do, know your application inside out. We've all done that. We've all had people help us with applications. Which is fine. But make sure you remember what you've written in your application and make sure you know everything in and out. Now, what that means, I'll give you an example. Um, in my Fulbright application, I mentioned a lot of things. So there are two applications in Fulbright, right? One is your research objectives and one's your personal objectives. Personal, you talk about your hobbies, your volunteer work, etc. Research more focused on your academics. In my personal one specifically, I mentioned autism. So I'm a certified autism trainer. Now, also being mindful that this is like, I'm talking about 10 years back. Autism wasn't very known. People didn't, and I'm talking about, I got my Fulbright from Pakistan as well. So it wasn't very common. There wasn't a lot of awareness, let alone there actually being trainers to help people with autism. What got picked up in my interview sessions for Fulbright was autism. Out of the 30-minute interview, they didn't care about business and IMC or Northwest, none of that. 20 minutes out of the 30-minute interview, they kept on asking me questions about our autism. What did I do? Where did I do my training? Do I plan to continue autism when I come back from the US? They were so intrigued by that. Now, had I just done like one small thing, mentioned it, and not really thought about it, they'd probably be like, oh, what potentially impressed them would not have been that point anymore. And my application could have been that of any other person. So make sure, my point with this story is make sure you know every single thing you've mentioned in your personal statement and essay. You have that, you rehearsed it, and you have the story ready. Um, Before I go into the deep research, we have a question in the chat. Tahir says, my mind goes completely blank. I can't understand anything, what to say or how to say, I even forget my vocab. I'm sorry to hear that, but I think that's happening because you're getting really stressed out and potentially anxious. And that is why that happens. So I think you need to do some meditation, some guided meditation, like whether that could be in the form of namaz, whether that could be in the form of general meditation, whether that could be whatever your beliefs are, or whatever calms you, you need to practice that. And then once you've done that, also practice mock interviews with your friends, with your mentors, with your teachers, whoever's available. Put yourself in that setting so you're okay and comfortable with a high pressure environment. So you wouldn't get, really nervous. So I hope this helps. Ashmal has raised his hand. I don't think you can unmute your mic, but you can ask me a question in the chat, right? Uh,
They can type in the Q&A box.
yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Ashmal, you can maybe type it in your Q&A box and then I'll get back to it. Uh, and then answer your question. All right. So we talked about know your application. Now let's move on to once you know your application, what's next? Deep research. The why. The why is always, the crux. What does that mean? You need to know the course you're applying to inside out. What's the structure of the course? What's the modules? What's the faculty? Do research on the professors. Not everyone, but you should know, okay, these are, the famous professors. These are some of the things they've done. These are the important modules, right? You do these research in any case when you're preparing. Make sure you've done that really, really well. You want to reference specific professors, but it cannot be like you name throwing. It has to be very much nicely tied into the question that's asked. It has to be natural flowing. So if they ask you a question specifically about, for instance, if you're a marketing major and there's an interview related to a marketing degree, and they ask you a question of, what do you think about XYZ marketing theory? And let's say a professor has done work on that, and you can be like, yeah, this is my view. And I love how Professor Schultz has done XYZ work on that. And I was reading his paper and I found, and I agree with this philosophy of his, and I disagree with this philosophy. But you see, it's very natural. It's not like you want to throw in his name just to, because everybody does that. You want to take it to the next level. You've done the research, you're quoting it, but you're quoting it in a very nice, subtle way. Very, very important. And then the last one, practice and pacing. This is very, very critical. Practice answering common questions clearly and at a moderate pace. Like I know so many very intelligent people that I deal with on a daily basis. But sometimes how you answer, if it's not in a calm manner, if it's very fast or very slow, you're unable to engage the audience. So it has to be, if you probably see the way I'm talking, it's going up and down and slow and you have to keep a momentum, pause, also engage the interviewer, whoever your audience is, to make sure that the flow is natural and it's interesting and nobody is getting tired and bored. Avoid filler words. What are filler words? Can you guys tell me what filler words are? And what is technical jargon? Unless it's related to your field. I'm going to look for that in the chat now. Tell me what are filler words. All right. Yes. Etc. Yes, these are filler words. But like where it's not needed, but you adding words in just to keep the continuity going. We all do that. So like, okay, maybe, yes, we all do that in general conversation. But it's always better that you practice that, especially when you're doing a professional interview in a setting. I just did you see. So you don't want to do that. All right. Vasma has a comment. Thanks for pointing that out, Miss Asha. I used to get anxious before interviews, but conversation-based mock interviews with ChatGPT have really helped, especially with managing anxiety, thinking on my feet, exploring different perspectives through prompts. We can ask ChatGPT to give us feedback as well. I think that's a very good point you raise because we have the option now of AI available, whether that's ChatGPT, Gemini, whichever tool you want to use. I'm indifferent. You can use that if you don't have, I mean, you can actually use both. So you can use ChatGPT, you can also use real people, create that environment. I always believe that keeping or simulating the same environment is always great. All right. Then, last point. See, this is not a tough one. This is like a very, very interesting one. How important do you think it is to have the right questions? At the end of the session, usually we all have questions, correct? We all prepare questions. Now, everybody knows this, guys. So, me telling you to prepare questions, this is nothing new. Anyone who's coming to the interview, they know they need to prepare questions. But what differentiates your questions from there is specificity. Ask about research opportunities, course flexibility, career pathways tied to specific modules. Avoid asking questions that are already available in the available on the university website, like what's the tuition cost? What's the application deadlines? When would I hear my result? What's the SAT cutoff? Nah, you don't ask these questions. You can get that from Google. You ask them questions that shows your level of thinking, your depth of thinking. You've done your work. You actually are passionate about this. So this is really, really, really important. So you see, I've used the word really three times. So this is just to show that this is three times more important than everything else here. All right. Closing statement is very important. Very, very, very important that you make towards the end. And how do I want you to make the closing statement? Your enthusiasm is going to be really important. Your qualifications are important. Of course, your delivery is important, but the energy you bring in is super, super critical. Be prepared, be yourself, and be very, very confident. I have a few other slides as well. I'm not completely cutting the session, but these are three, four things. If you have done this, I guarantee you that you wouldn't struggle with anything in the questions. Now I'm going back to the chat. Any questions, guys? Anything that is clear, unclear? All right, let's go. It would give an impression. Okay, down, down, down. Sometimes your master's work is not that close to your professor. Oh, sorry, to your profession. What should be done? That's fine. When you say it's not close to your profession, not professor, right? That means like you've done, maybe you are, like in my case, I had done my undergrad in finance then I chose a very separate career. Then I went into tech and what I did at the start, I've taken two, three different jumps and then finally found out what I love. So it's absolutely fine. But you should tie up a story. Like even when I did finance and then I went into digital marketing and then I was going into like business, I tied it up. I've seen many people who started off as lawyers and then went into marketing. I'm not kidding. This is an actual example of a colleague of mine who was a trained lawyer who became a marketing manager at Meta. I was shocked. That was the first time I was hearing as well. But yes, a trained lawyer, because law is a very specific skill set and takes a very long time to develop and learn in exams. So yes, you can do that at any stage. I am a firm believer of that. All right. Any other questions? Anything else? Shall we move on to the next one? Let me check. Okay. Guys, keep the questions coming in. I would love to answer any questions that you have. Okay. Now that we talked about what you need to do, I also need to talk about a few things. Relationship building, community development, partnerships is very, very important. This is a little bit about what I have done. These things are important and critical for you to think about as you think about your interviews. Like, for instance, pre Fulbright, to build my community, I was part of the Autism Sunrise program. I already talked about it, so I'm not gonna talk about that too much. Post Fulbright, I do mentoring and counseling. I do counseling of families, I do mentoring, I do sessions like this. I dedicate, or I try to dedicate, at least 10 to 12 hours per month of pro bono work in some form, which is very much focused on community development. So, community development can be through these sessions where I'm reaching out to all of you guys, whether that's, one-on-one coaching, whether that's, any course teaching, any form. These things are very critical. I genuinely am passionate about it, but these things, when you're talking in interviews, anyone who's passionate about community development, and it comes across as that in the interviews, in the conversations, it's very much loved. I've done Fulbright alumni groups. I'm just pointing this out. The reason for this is so you know what things you can talk about, because I'm sure you've done not exactly similar, but in the same level, stuff that you want to maybe highlight or talk about. Fulbright alumni groups, I've represented Fulbright in different alumni groups, then Fulbright conferences, UGrad panelist, interviewer, and also Fulbright panelist and interviewer. Um, Joined the Uber team to launch COVID, work from home turned adversity into opportunity, coached and mentored people for Fulbright. Just food of thought what you want to do. Upskilling classes on negotiation, digital marketing, and then I want you to think about the scholarship impact. This is now important. Whether you're applying through a scholarship, whether you're applying individually, whichever form, I want you to have always I want you to look at the forest and the trees. What does that mean? Forest means holistic, trees means individual. So we talked a lot about individual things, right? This is your interview, this is what you need to do. I tried to coach or gave certain recommended approach and how to do well there. Now I'm stepping away from that and looking at the forest. High level, what do you want to achieve? Who are you? Like, who are you as a person? What do you do for community's sake? What do you do on the social stage? What do you do as your hobbies? And, creating an entire dome who is unique and special and very much you. Then lifelong impact, change, maker mindset. This is very important to come across in any university interview, in any major. It's great. These are some of the things that I've talked about. I was a volunteer mentorship programs in Shaukat Khanum and in SOS, Inclusion and Diversity Global Champion for Uber, Women of Uber Champion. These are like designations, like posts that I held for a couple of years where I would do a lot of work around these globally. I would travel around, get women motivated, get people motivated to do charity work as part of my job at Uber. There's a lot of time I spent doing that. Then skills development, upskilling. This, in any case, is always important. Post Fulbright, for instance, once I got done with my education, I did another degree in Harvard University for a year. This was through Uber and it was funded by Uber. So this was an extra master's that I mentioned, but it was an online master's back in 2017 in leadership and strategy. And then I went to Spain to get my ScotWorks degree in negotiation training, teaching negotiation courses online. I did that for a couple of years, I think 2, 3 years on top of my daily job, but I just didn't have the time to accommodate. But this is the thinking I want you to have in your life. This is the approach that I want you to have generally in life, but also for that to come across in your virtual interviews, right? Here, I'm just laying it out, right? We don't have enough time for me to like sort of go into like specifically these, and you feel free to ask me questions, but you have to like start thinking in these approaches. That's my point. All right. I'm gonna go back to the chat. Anonymous attendee, yes, you can use your name. Always appreciate to get to know people. So yeah, Tahir says, Miss, I'm not good in speaking. I do a lot of efforts, but very unfortunately, no progress I've seen in myself. You will. And everybody has a different skill set, right? You might be really good at math, or you might be really good at science or art. So practice can help and support. So you can practice more, and this would definitely be something that is good for you. Ashmal says, what would you suggest if someone is facing challenges in socializing or making connections? Could you believe that I was at one point, I was always an extroverted personality, but I didn't particularly liked, gatherings where I had to network and socialize. And that's my entire job. And, it's interesting how you can train yourself to actually become better at anything. So, how does that happen? It comes with discomfort. If you're in an uncomfortable situation, put yourself in that situation. It's okay. And then you gradually and slowly you become better. What would you suggest? Okay, this is done. Hamad says, would you recommend preparing presentation slides about our interest, experience, and ask to? No, no. Hamad, you're not. I like the thinking. I like where you're coming from. The reason I'm saying no is because I'd rather you talk through it. Make it more passionate, make it more realistic. Let your true personality come out than just the slides. All right. Huda says volunteering at a hospital for underprivileged people counts as community building. Yes, absolutely. It counts as a community building. It counts as someone who deeply cares and wants to serve the community they're living in. Muhammad Kamal says, what will you suggest to identify the questions? Like the questions come in our minds are the one that act one. What will you suggest to identify the questions, like the question comes in our minds and the one actually asked? Yeah, maybe you've prepared a few questions, and then there is a very interesting conversation that comes up where there's a question that stems out of that conversation. Why not? I would say you don't need to just stick to the questions that are coming in. You can ask that question as well. Tell me about your US visa interview experience. I don't remember, but it was probably they just asked me, are you going for Fulbright? And I was like, yeah, Northwestern, and that's it. One or two questions, and that's it. There was nothing, it wasn't very tough. Two questions or one question, that's it. Uh, Vasma says, Madam, could you briefly share how your virtual work interviews differ from academic interviews and how one should best adapt to those differences based on your experience? I don't think there's a vast difference. It's the differences in the content. The strategy I gave you, set the base, the technological structure, the environment, the content will be different. And the content will also be different from Huda versus Maria versus Shamal. Um, all of the different people having different majors, the content would be different. But overall structure, absolutely the same. Gathering certificates from social organizations, volunteer work is okay, not fake ones. I don't condone that. I think if you've done actual work, then you should talk about it. It people can tell. Because if you ask me any questions about autism, I'll be able to answer that. Not only have I done that, I'm passionate about it. But if you ask me a question about something that I've not done, it can backfire. Hamad says, does the interview completely lead the interview, or do you have any say in it too? Does the interview have questions prepared for us? Yeah, they have questions, of course, prepared. There are a set of questions that they have, but then they have, tick boxes. Okay, done. Now I need to ask this. And you can lead the conversation. Very much so. You can draft the conversation in a way of how you're answering the question. You get their interest in in a specific conversation where you want to divert it. So that depends on how masterful you are as a speaker. All right. If there are no further questions, I think this was very productive. I really enjoyed, and I will hand it over to Noor. I thank everyone for their time this Monday evening. Noor, over to you. I had a really, really good time. Thank you. Oh,
Thank you,
sorry, there's one
Aisha.
question.
Yeah.
If everything in visa interview, then why do we, if everything is visa interview, then why do we do a lot of efforts of admission? If you don't have an admission, then what would you need the visa for? Right?
Good
So
point.
visa is just yeah, you need the university, right? To go to. All right. Thank you. Over to you, Noor.
Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. And as always, Aisha, thank you for a wonderful session. Have a wonderful night, everybody.
Thanks,
Take care.
everyone.
Bye.
Bye-bye.